Good afternoon. This is Kurt Beckett, the Chair of FSEC, calling our May 21st meeting to order. And Ms. Grantham, if you would call the roll, please.
It will actually be Ms. Barker.
Oh, thank you.
Department of Commerce.
We might do a mic check too, just to make sure for our council members online. Can you hear us here in the room? We were using the above our head mics today rather than on the table.
Yes, I can hear the room.
Thank you, Councilman Young. We can mark us here.
Department of Ecology.
Lovett, present.
Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Pete Hamplin, present.
Department of Natural Resources.
Lenny Young, present.
Local Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Stacy Brewster, present.
Local government and optional state agencies. For the Hop Hill Project, Benton County, Paul Crouppen. For the Carriger Solar Project, Klickitat County, Matt Childs.
Matt Childs, present.
For the Wallula Gap Project, Benton County, Adam File. For the GoldenEye Best Project, Skagit County, Robbie Eckroth.
Croft, present.
Assistant Attorney Generals, John Thompson,
Present.
Zach Packer,
Present.
Talia Tuitt. For FSEC staff, I will call those anticipated to speak today. Sonia Bumpus,
Present.
Amy Hofkemeyer,
Present.
Amy Moon,
Amy Moon, present.
Sean Green,
Present.
Sarah Randolph,
Present.
John Barnes,
Present.
Joanne Snarsky,
Present.
Dave Walker,
Present.
Lisa McLean.
Present.
For operational updates, Kittitas Valley Wind Project,
Jared Cassidy, present.
Wild Horse Wind Power Project, Grace Harbor Energy Center, Chehalis Generation Facility,
Jeremy Smith, present.
Columbia Generating Station,
Josh Laporte, present.
Columbia Solar, Goose Prairie Solar,
Nelson Jaup, present.
Austria Solar.
Trip Staken is present.
Is there anyone online for the Council for the Environment?
Yes, Sarah Reineveld and Yuri Kurl are present.
Chair, there is a quorum for all councils.
Very well, thank you. Moving on, Council, we have a proposed agenda before us. And before I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda, I would like to note a welcome update, if someone would incorporate this into proposed motion. Oversight on my part was in our number 6 other, in addition to the rulemaking update that is published there, there's an intent to have a short verbal legislative session update. So we would add that into the second item under other. And with that context from the chair, I would entertain a motion on the agenda. Councilman Penfield.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve the agenda with the addition of the legislative briefing under item number 6.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Lenny Young, second.
Stacy Bynum. Thank you, Councilman Young. There's a motion on the table and seconded. Any further discussion of the council? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is adopted as amended. Moving on to the meeting minutes. April 16th monthly meeting minutes have been shared with council. Are there any edits or additions to the minutes. I, as chair, have reviewed them and did not have any substantive changes to add to this month. Further, I'm sorry, and could I have a motion on the table to adopt? Remember our procedures here.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and move to approve the April 16th, 2025 monthly meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Stacy Brewster, second.
Thank you, Council Brewster. Motion to adopt the minutes is on the table. Or is there any further discussion or edits, amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, minutes are adopted. We will move on to the operational updates, starting with Jared Cassidy of Kittitas Valley Wind.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Beckett, FSEC Council and staff. This is Jared Cassidy with EDP Renewables for the Kittitas Valley Wind Power Project. We had nothing non-routine to report for the period.
Thank you. Moving on to Wild
Thank you.
Horse, Sarah Randolph, maybe.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Beckett, council members and staff. This is Sarah Randolph, Site Specialist for Wild Horse. The facility update is provided in your packet. There are no non-routine updates to report.
Thank you. Moving on to the Chehalis Generation Facility, Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, council members, and FSEC staff. This is Jeremy Smith, the operations manager representing the Chehalis Generation Facility. There are no non-routine items to report for this period.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Moving on to Grays Harbor Energy Center, Chris Sharon.
Chair Beckett, this is Sarah Randolph. I didn't hear Chris on the line, so I'll go ahead and give the update. The facility update is provided in your packet. There are no non-routine updates to report.
Very well, thank you. Moving on to Columbia Solar. I'm not certain I heard a representative either on the roll call.
I'll go ahead and give that update as well. This is Sarah Randolph, Site Specialist for Columbia Solar. The facility update is provided in your packet. There are no non-routine updates to report.
Thank you. Moving on to the report for both the Columbia Generating Station number 1 and number 2, WNP 1 and 4. Mr. Laporte.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett and FSEC Council and staff. This is Josh Laporte representing Columbia Generating Station and Washington Nuclear Projects 1 and 4. The facility update is included in your packet for both sites, and there are no non-routine updates to report.
Thank you. Goose Prairie Solar, Mr. Gia.
Hi, Nelson here. So for the month of April, approximate generation was 19,700 megawatt hours. We had similar inverter issues compared to the previous month. Outside of that, no non-routine issues operationally or environmentally or any safety issues to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Austria Solar.
Good afternoon. This is John Volz with Cypress Creek Renewables. The construction is underway on the project. We are on schedule. Road construction is getting close to being done. Laydown yards have been installed. Current activities ongoing are pile installation, fence installation, some trenching and cable install, as well as some of the work of the substation foundations going in. No major environmental or safety incidents to report.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Bolts. We appreciate the update. So it looks like we are already moving on to our Carriger Solar briefing by our staff. Ms. Snarski, I believe, will give the opening brief.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. This is Joanne Snarski, the siting specialist for the proposed Carriger Solar project in Klickitat County. Since the council's last regularly scheduled monthly meeting, a special council meeting was held on May 5th at the Grange Hall in Goldendale. The purpose of that meeting was to address the applicant's request for expedited processing. At that meeting, the council voted to approve the expedited processing for Carriger Solar. On the following day, May 6th, staff provided a site tour of the proposed location of the project to the council members. For today's update, staff prepared a presentation on past and future actions that will provide context to meet the purpose of today's update and request for Carriger Solar. Sean Green, our SEPA specialist, our State Environmental Policy Act specialist assigned to the project, will take you through this presentation. Sean?
Thank you. Let me just share mine. Okay. Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. My name is Sean Green. I am a State Environmental Policy Act or SEPA specialist for FSEC. And the purpose of this presentation is to describe for the council the process that staff went through in the preparation of the Mitigated Determination of Non-Significance, or MDNS, for the Carriger Solar project. Introduce the council to changes that staff plans to include in the revised Mitigated Determination of Non-Significance, or RMDNS, in response to comments received during the associated public comment period, describe the expedited process that the project is now in, and explain today's staff request for council action. As we're going to be covering a number of topics, I anticipate there may be questions from council members. I will try to keep an eye out for raised hands, but if I miss a council member, please feel free to let me know. And to begin, I'd like to take a minute to remind the council of some of the specifics regarding the Carriger project. Carriger Solar LLC is a project that was submitted to FSEC for consideration on February 10th, 2023 by Cypress Creek Renewables LLC. For convenience, I will be referring to Cypress Creek Renewables as the applicant throughout the remainder of this presentation. Carriger is a proposed 160 megawatt solar-only generation facility with a 63 megawatt battery energy storage system, or BESS, that is to be located on 2,108 acres of privately owned land, approximately 2 miles west and northwest of the city of Goldendale in unincorporated Klickitat County. As a note, that 2,108 acres represents the total project lease boundary, meaning all lands that are under project control. No more than 1,326 acres of that area are proposed for the maximum project extent, meaning the total footprint of all project components. When constructed, the project would interconnect with the existing power grid through a 500-foot-long, 500 kilovolt overhead tie-in line to the Bonneville Power Administration's Knight substation, which is located on a parcel adjacent to the northern part of the project boundary. As with any project submitted to FSEC, staff review the proposal to identify any adverse environmental impacts associated with one or more SEPA resources identified in Washington Administrative Code, or WAC, 197-11-444. These resources are listed here on the left half of the slide. I will address the colored asterisks in a moment, but I want to speak to the tasks that staff is responsible for during a SEPA review. Staff work with relevant subject matter experts at other federal, state, and local agencies and at our contractor, WSP, to assess the project, identify and determine the magnitude of environmental impacts, and recommend mitigation to reduce those impacts. Of particular importance are impacts that are deemed, quote, significant by SEPA, meaning those that have a reasonable likelihood of more than moderate adverse impacts, or those that would have a severe adverse impact. FSEC staff proposed mitigation for any environmental impacts, regardless of significance, but if after the imposition of all reasonable mitigation, an impact would remain significant, an environmental impact statement would be required. As evidenced by the fact that FSEC has published an MDNS for this project, staff have determined that all impacts associated with the project have been mitigated to a level below significance. Now, as for the asterisks, for the purpose of illustration, I have added asterisk indicators to the listed resources to indicate how they have been addressed by FSEC staff and or the applicant. Those resources with blue asterisks have mitigation measures that staff have proposed in the MDNS for inclusion in the eventual site certification agreement as conditions for project approval. I should note that for resources where mitigation was not proposed by staff, that does not mean that there were no impacts identified. It simply means that the impacts were appropriately addressed by existing applicant commitments in the application. In the interest of time, I won't go through each individual mitigation measure in this presentation, but I'd encourage anyone interested in seeing them to read through the MD&S and/or the associated staff memo, which is available on the project webpage on the FSEC site. Those resources with red asterisks required substantial project redesign as part of the discussions between FSEC staff, the applicant, and other interested parties to address resource impacts. These project redesigns resulted in the project either avoiding or minimizing impacts to the relevant resource by shifting or reducing the project footprint. But these changes were incorporated as applicant commitments that are now considered as fundamental parts of the proposal and are therefore not reflected in the list of mitigation measures shown in the MD&S. A more thorough discussion of impacts, mitigation measures, applicant commitments, and redesigns can be found in the staff memo, which was attached to the MD&S. Next, I wanted to show a rough overview of some of the project layout changes that have been incorporated throughout the FSEC review of the project. The figure on the left is from the original application for site certification on February 10th of 2023, and the figure on the right was provided by the applicant on January 14th of 2025. These figures aren't one-to-one on their symbology, so don't worry about things like the light blue DNR parcel suddenly appearing in the last 2 years. I can promise that it was there from the start. As you may expect, the applicant is constantly revising the project footprint to accommodate for updated information and discussions with FSEC. So even the figure from January of this year is not fully current, as it does not show the setbacks from the DNR parcel that were agreed to in April. But to point out a few of the more substantial layout changes, if you look at the southern third of the project, you can see a number of the white blocks, which represent solar arrays in this case, have been removed from the plan. These panels were removed to accommodate buffers to wetlands and vernal pools, which are shallow depressions that are seasonally full of water, that were identified during the applicant's consultation with the Department of Ecology. In order to recover some of the lost energy production potential from these panels, the applicant has filled in a few gaps elsewhere in the project area, most obvious of which is the new wedge of panels in the center east portion of the project. It's not at all easy to see in these figures, so I'll show you them in more detail in the next slides, but you can also see where panels have been moved back from State Route 142 along the southern boundary of the project area and Knight Road, which is a north-south road that bisects the project, to reduce visual impacts to motorists along those roads. I should also state that there have been project redesigns that have been made to reduce impacts to traditional cultural properties identified by the Yakama Nation. As both the nature and location of traditional cultural properties are considered confidential information, I will not be discussing those redesigns related to those resources in this public meeting, so as not to risk breaching confidentiality, but that information can be directly communicated to the council via other methods. And before we move on, I just want to make it clear that the more recent figure on the right is in no way final. As I mentioned, it doesn't show some already agreed upon setbacks, and the applicant may continue to microsite the project up to the start of construction with FSEC approval, so long as existing setbacks and buffers are adhered to. It is possible that some of the panels tentatively removed from the southern portion of the project may be reinserted prior to construction, but in any scenario, the final design will constrain all components to areas within the bold black line, which represents the project lease boundary. One environmental resource that FSEC staff initially identified as potentially significantly impacted was visual impacts associated to experiences by motorists along State Route 142 and Knight Road. FSEC staff and the applicant worked on additional setbacks along those roads that, based on updated visual simulations, FSEC staff have determined effectively reduce impacts to a level below significance. To give you an idea of what we're looking at right now, we are located at the red dot in the mini-map to the right on State Route 142 along the southern border of the project area. Following FSEC's initial indication that visual impacts along this road were potentially significant, the applicant proposed a redesign in which the fence line was moved back 30 additional feet from the roadway, making the project boundary at least 70 feet from the road. Given the shortness of this point of interaction with the project and the roadway, approximately 1/4 mile, and the speed that motorists would be traveling along SR 42 with a speed limit of 50 miles per hour, these visual impacts were subsequently determined to be less than significant. For this and the setbacks shown on the next few slides, I do have the visual simulations prepared by the applicant ready to display to the council if there is an interest after the completion of the presentation. Another area where we initially identified potentially significant visual impacts to motorists was along Knight Road, a north-south road that touches the project at 4 spots. Again, for reference, the point that we're looking at in these layouts corresponds with the red dot in the mini-map on the right. The applicant has proposed increasing setbacks along the entire stretch of Knight Road. Just to clarify that the setbacks that we're looking at in these particular figures are not limited to that area of the project. Following setbacks, project fencing will be located at least 100 feet from Knight Road, and panels will be located at least 120 feet from the road. Again, based on updated visual simulations produced, showing reduced visual impacts to motorists along the new setbacks, FSEC staff determined that the impacts are now less than significant. Setbacks were also increased along the DNR parcel that is located in between 2 sections of the project. Potentially significant visual impacts to visual aesthetics and quality of experience to users of these public lands, including hunters and recreationalists, were identified, and setbacks were agreed to that would reduce these impacts. These figures show that the fence line setback along the southern boundary of the DNR parcel was increased from 20 feet to 100 feet, and the panel setback was increased from 75 feet to 125 feet. Based on updated visual simulations produced showing reduced visual impacts with the new setbacks, FSEC staff again determined that these impacts are now less than significant. And finally, as was done with the southern boundary, setbacks were increased along the northern boundary of the DNR parcel to address similar impacts. These figures show that the fence line and panel setbacks have been increased by 50 feet, with the fence at least 100 feet from the boundary and panels at least 140 feet from the boundary. For the purposes of the MD&S, staff determined that the updated visual simulations produced showing the new setbacks showed that visual impacts were less than significant. So, following the implementation of all redesigns, setbacks, and mitigation considered by FSEC staff, staff determined that all project impacts could be reduced to a level below significant, as defined by SEPA. As a result, FSEC issued a mitigated determination of non-significance for the Carriger project on April 7th of this year. A 14-day public comment period was subsequently opened, as required by Washington Administrative Code 197.11.340, that closed on April 20th. Both the MD&S issuance and public comment period were publicly noticed through the SEPA Register, local newspapers, the FSEC website, and other means. At the close of the public comment period, a total of 7 comments had been received. 1 from a tribe, the Yakama Nation, 3 from state and local government agencies, and 3 from members of the public. Based on these comments, additional discussion with interested parties, and FSEC staff review, it is FSEC's intention to issue a revised mitigated determination of non-significance by the end of June to reflect changes in response to comments received. This time is needed to complete updated impact assessments, finalize new mitigation measures, and complete communications with interested parties. So with the publication of the MD&S and the Council's previous land use consistency order issued on September 25th of 2023, the project met the 2 requirements to be potentially eligible for expedited process. This is the process outlined in the Revised Code of Washington, or RCW, Chapter 80.50.075 and WAC 463-43. But there are 3 primary results of a project entering this process. First, no further review of an application can be done by an independent consultant, except as needed as part of a recommendation to the governor. Second, no adjudicated proceeding under RCW Chapter 34.05 will be held. And finally, within 60 days of the effective date of the determination on expedited process, the Council shall forward its recommendation for approval or denial of the project to the governor. Importantly, this 60-day timeline can be extended to a later time if mutually agreed to by both the applicant and the FSEC Council. As Joanne mentioned a bit earlier, on May 5th of 2025, the Council held a special meeting to consider the request from the applicant that the project be granted expedited processing. Prior to this action, a public comment period was held from April 29th to May 1st, during which a total of 8 comments were received. 5 were comments opposed to the action and the project due to concerns about the industrial nature of the project and the loss of farmland. 2 were comments in favor of the action and the project due to support for solar development generally. And 1 comment was received from the Yakama Nation, which requested that the Council delay its decision on expedited processing until after formal consultation had been held between the Yakama Nation Council and the FSEC Council. Following council deliberations and questions that were addressed to FSEC staff, the council voted on and approved the Carriger project for expedited processing with an effective date of May 5th, 2025. With the 60-day deadline included within expedited processing, this results in a deadline for recommendation to the governor for approval or denial of the project of July 4th, 2025. So as I said before, staff currently anticipates preparing a revised MD&S based on comments received on the MD&S. The first comment that we received that was deemed substantive enough to warrant a change to the MD&S was a claim that the visual and quality of experience impacts to users of the DNR parcel, specifically along the northern boundary, would remain too high, even after the setbacks that we have already discussed. After considering the issue, FSEC staff intend to add a requirement to the revised MD&S that the applicant install periodic earthen berms along the half-mile shared border with the DNR parcel on its northern boundary. This would both break up the visibility of the project from the northern boundary of the DNR parcel and allow for the project to blend in more of the existing topography, which is largely defined by small, gently sloped hills. The second comment requiring an addition to the MD&S was a concern that was raised regarding the challenges with water dispersal in the event of a fire on the site. As the project is located approximately 15 minutes drive time from the nearest fire station and the local fire response agency, Rural 7 Fire and Rescue, only possesses 2 fire tenders, which are the trucks that supply water for the hoses on the trucks. Rural 7 estimates that they would only be able to disperse water for 30 minutes of every 60 minutes in the case of a fire on the site due to the need to periodically drive back and refill their tenders. To address this impact to emergency response services, FSEC staff proposes to add a requirement to the revised MD&S that the applicant install a 10,000-gallon water cistern on site that will be accessible for emergency response personnel use in the event of a fire. Based on the calculations staff have been provided, Rural 7 has the capability of pumping at full volume for approximately 30 minutes straight using their 3,000-gallon and 5,000-gallon tenders. Providing a 10,000-gallon cistern on site would provide an additional 30 to 45 minutes of pumping. Combined, this should allow for at least 1.5 hours of pumping, assuming the tenders perform a refill round trip while the cistern is used. The final of the 3 changes that staff anticipate incorporating into a revised MD&S is as a result of multiple comments regarding the potential environmental health and public safety impacts associated with a fire at the project's battery energy storage system, or BESS. One potential avenue for addressing these impacts that has been raised is changing the battery chemistry currently proposed lithium ion phosphate chemistry. Staff have assessed other potential battery chemistries and believe that the currently selected one is most appropriate for this project at this time. Some alternative chemistries, such as lead acid, have many of the same environmental risks as lithium ion-based batteries, but have a much shorter lifespan, resulting in excessive waste. Other alternative chemistries, such as liquid sodium, appear to have fewer environmental concerns, but are still immature technologies at this time that aren't widely available commercially for BESSes. Staff is satisfied that the lithium ion phosphate chemistry, which was specifically selected as it has a greater safety margin than other lithium ion chemistries, when combined with the commitments and mitigation measures outlined in the MD&S, is sufficient to address this impact. These measures include the fact that the BESS will consist of the self-contained storage modules placed in racks with a cooling system, will be mounted on a cement pad that will be encircled with a gravel buffer, and will contain fire suppression systems designed in accordance with all applicable fire codes and the most current National Fire Protection Association standards, especially Standard 855, standard for the installation of stationary energy storage systems, which was last updated in 2023. This system would include monitoring equipment, alarm systems, condensed aerosol fire suppressants, gaseous media fire extinguishing devices, and remote shutoff capabilities. In recognition that battery technology will assumedly develop over time, however, staff propose adding a requirement that the applicant assess alternative battery chemistries when the BESS is due to be replaced, and recommend the most environmentally friendly chemistry that is widely commercially available at the time for FSEC's final approval. The applicant anticipates a 15 to 20 year lifespan for the BESS, at which point in time new chemistries may be available that are less impactful. And before we complete the presentation and move on to council questions, deliberations, and potential actions, staff wanted to present the council with the upcoming timeline for the Carriger application that it has been granted expedited process. First, an important caveat. I mentioned before that the staff anticipates publishing a revised MDNS by the end of June. For the purposes of SEPA, the MDNS is considered a final document. So council actions made following the publication of the MDNS are being done following the completion of FSEC's SEPA review. The proposed changes to be added to the revised MDNS can still be incorporated as conditions into the site certification agreement pending council decisions, but the publication date of the RMDNS exists outside of this timeline and does not affect anything listed here. Okay, on to the timeline. On May 5th of 2025, council held a special meeting to address the applicant's request for expedited process. Following deliberations, the council granted that request, and immediately following the special council meeting, a public hearing was held during which several members of the local community expressed their thoughts on the environmental impacts of the project and their opinions on past and future council actions. The council was present at this hearing. On May 6th, the following day, the council visited the proposed site of the Carrier facility. And today, on May 21st, the council is holding its regularly scheduled monthly meeting where it will consider staff's request on council action that I will explain in more detail in the next slide. Depending on the council's deliberation and decision, staff may begin drafting documents to support a future council recommendation on approval or denial of the project following today's meeting. On June 4th, the chair, a subset of the council, or the entire council is tentatively scheduled to meet with the Accommodation Council to hold formal consultation regarding the Carrier project. This will be a closed meeting to allow the Accommodation Council to discuss confidential tribal information on traditional cultural properties. At this time, the date and time of this consultation has not been confirmed, but staff anticipate a confirmation in the near future. If the council directs staff to begin preparing draft documents today, staff will have until June 9th to complete those draft documents so that they can be submitted for public comment and provided to the council ahead of the June council meeting. Staff currently anticipates providing a 10-day public comment period to receive comments on the draft documents. On June 18th, the council will hold their regularly scheduled monthly meeting during which they may direct staff to make changes to the draft recommendation documents and/or make a final decision on whether to formally recommend the project for approval or denial to the governor. If the council does decide to vote to recommend the project for approval or denial to the governor at this meeting, they will simultaneously direct staff to finalize the recommendation documents and prepare a recommendation package for submittal to the governor. As matters currently stand, staff would have until June 25th to make any directed edits and prepare the recommendation package and submit it along with the council's recommendation. June 25th is when the current application extension previously agreed to by the council and the applicant expires, though it can be further extended by mutual agreement of both parties. July 4th represents the end of the 60-day expedited process timeline at which the council's recommendation to the governor would be due. This can also be extended by mutual agreement between the council and the applicant, but as it comes after the ASC or application for site certification extension expiration deadline of June 25th, it is moot for the time being. And as you may be able to tell after that rundown, there are several points in the upcoming process with tight deadlines and quick turnarounds, both for the council and for staff. Staff anticipates that an increase in the ASC extension and possibly an extension to the expedited process deadline may be needed. And so following this presentation, staff would request that the council take action on the following. Staff requests that the council vote to direct staff to prepare draft recommendation documents for approval or denial of the project. As noted, these documents would be drafts and would be subject to change as a result of any decisions or discussions that occur in tribal consultation, council deliberations, or other avenues, and would be submitted for public comment. If the council directs staff to prepare draft documents and support a recommendation for a project approval, staff plan to use the mitigation measures outlined within the MDNS, those shown in the previous slides that will be added to the RMDNS, any mitigation measures that arrive from tribal consultation, and any additional measures that the council identifies. These measures would be made conditions for ultimate project approval. And finally, I want to make it clear that this request is not for a final council action on the formal decision on whether to recommend the project for approval or denial to the governor. That will come at a future council meeting after the council has provided the draft recommendation documents and will be publicly noticed as a potential final action ahead of time. And with that, I and other staff are available to answer any questions that the council members may have about the MDNS, RMDNS, expedited process, the timeline, or the Carrier project in general.
Very well. Thank you, Sean and Joanne. Thank you as well for the PowerPoint that I think does a nice job of at least helping to summarize the original state and the updated current state. Obviously, there are some more changes that are still in the mix and possible, as you highlighted, so worthy of restating that, I think. With those comments, let me turn this to the council for your questions or comments on the presentation, and then I would note on the process and what action may or may not be considered today and some of the other future steps. We will come to that next, so I would say this would be more, for now, the discussion on the project presentation, if that's acceptable to council. So with that, I see a hand from Councilman Young.
Thank you, Chair. As regards change number 2 in the RMDNS, what is the manner of filling and refilling the 10,000 gallon cisterns? Where does the water come from, and how long would it take to recharge the cisterns after the water has been depleted?
As to the second part of that question, I don't know right now how long it takes to refill the cistern. As to the source of the water, it would be the same water source as the project would use for their operations at this point, which is intended to be an offsite water source from a utility provider in the region.
So would that water have to be trucked in, or is there a pipeline to a water source that fills the cisterns?
It would be trucked in.
Okay. I just was thinking along the lines of if the cistern water is needed for firefighting, is it something that could be periodically recharged and reused during that firefighting, or is it sort of once it's gone, it's gone for all practical purposes for the remainder of that fire?
It's a question of the equipment available to the fire response agency. The local agency, Rural 7, only has 2 fire tenders available to them. So in the event of a fire, they would assumedly be refilling those tenders and using them immediately as they came onto the site. So if there were additional response equipment from other agencies in the area, they might be able to refill the cistern and keep making round trips.
Did staff consider, or did you talk with the applicant about the potential requirement for the applicant to contract and immediately engage contracted water tenders to recharge and bring water to the fire beyond what the local fire department has?
We can look into that. I don't know in that scenario if there is like an emergency response available from like local water utilities, but we can certainly look into that.
And perhaps even beyond public agencies such as fire departments or water utilities, whether there are contractors that would specialize in this type of thing in an emergency situation and could be immediately engaged to supplement what local agencies can do.
We'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Brewster.
Yeah, I have a question following up on the fire emergency plan. The Rural Fire District Chief specifically requested having the project provide another tender, which is different than what staff is proposing. Was that developed with Fire Chief?
Yes. So in their comment letter, Rural 7 did request that the applicant furnish Rural 7 with a new build fire tender built to their specifications. Staff ran into a few issues with considering that as part of the proposal. For one thing, that fire tender would assumedly be used for other fire response from Rural 7 throughout the life of the project, and there was a question of what responsibility the applicant would have if, for instance, that fire tender was damaged or lost on a fire offsite. Would the applicant be responsible for producing a new fire tender? This option, the water cistern, is something that FSEC has used on previous projects with the buy-in of local fire response, and it was deemed to be a more project-specific way of mitigating for the potential impacts to water dispersal in the event of a fire.
This is Matt Childs from Klickitat County. I've got a question.
Let's go ahead, Council Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For this fire stuff, I think the 10,000 gallons on site there is a good idea. And as someone locally, stretching that response time out to an hour and a half of available water is going to give time for DNR to fly in with helicopters and stuff like that, and air resources to continue the fighting efforts, assuming the fire has not been extinguished by then. Has any thought been given to the possibility of digging a pond that can be used as a cistern for refilling helicopters on site? Because a fast turnaround can make a huge difference in filling in fighting a fire. If they can do a 2-minute turnaround because there's a pond within a mile or half a mile, that can make a huge difference in fighting a fire.
To answer your question, yes, that was considered. As the project layout currently stands, the applicant is pretty crunched for space to place their panels. As you saw in the change in the project layout in one of the earlier slides, they have reduced their panel layout by a pretty substantial amount to accommodate wetland buffers and vernal pool buffers and visual setbacks along the roads in the DNR parcel. So at this time, I'm not sure that there would be available space within project control to actually install like an artificial reservoir.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. On the recommended change 3 regarding the BES, the concern of the county and especially of the citizens isn't so much that the BES is going to catch fire and spread into surrounding areas, although that is a risk that is being addressed by this change. The concern is that the fire will produce a toxic plume, which is going to adversely affect the health of the citizens of the county and perhaps more importantly, pollute a large swath of ground from fallout, if you will, of heavy metals and such for forever, basically. So our concern is not that the fire is going to spread, but the fire is going to produce smoke. And has FSEC given any thought to a way in which smoke can be prevented from escaping from a BES system fire and the toxic air pollution that's going to come out of that?
Yeah, we certainly have considered it. It is a difficult problem to address. Rural 7 did state that they use water dispersal to kind of dampen smoke as it rises, which diminishes how much the smoke is distributed aerially. So that kind of feeds into the cistern, giving Rural 7 more time to dampen any fumes that come off. In terms of like heavy metals and the like leaching into the ground nearby, the applicant would be responsible for those damages and remediation of the soils as part of their spill response and control plan. But staff believe that the fire suppression measures that are part of the BES system, as well as the availability of water as part of the water cistern, are sufficient to reduce the potential impacts from toxic fumes to a less than significant level.
So are the fire suppression systems in the BES designed to actually put out a fire? Because it was my understanding that once a chemical fire of that nature starts, it's going to keep burning until the chemical supply is used up. Do they have a technology to stop that fire?
So you're correct that when I mentioned the National Fire Protection Association standards specific to this type of structure that were updated in 2023, and as part of that update, it was recommended that there is less distribution of toxic chemicals and heavy metals into the air and surrounding soil if those elements are allowed to burn up within the fire as opposed to trying to put the fire out. There are elements within the fire suppression system within the BESS that are intended to reduce the risk of fire in one component from spreading to others, including a condensed aerosol fire suppressant and a gaseous media fire extinguishing devices, as well as remote shutoff devices in the BESS. So there are elements within the BESS that are intended to diminish the chance of all BESS components catching on fire.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the county would still like to see a hold on the installation of the BESS until such time that the technology advances that this is no longer a risk, because this is a risk that the county is frankly not willing to take of potential toxic fallout that would not be allowed from any smokestack industry, for example, and yet there's a significant probability that such a fallout could land on our citizens. So we would like to see, and I know the applicant at our meeting expressed that he believed that the BESS system they wanted to approve it, but didn't think it would be immediately installed. I would like to see that not immediately installed, pushed out until the technology becomes friendly enough that there is no risk of that toxic fallout in the event of a fire.
Director Bumpus.
Thank you, Chair Beckett, and good afternoon, council members. I just wanted to make the comment generally that in terms of the mitigation that we're discussing today, just bear in mind that I think, we're talking about risk, but the mitigation measures that we're focusing on here really are around normal operations. So just bear that in mind. So while we have mitigation that I think addresses risk, the risk of, say, a fire with the BESS, the probability is low, and so most of the measures that we're focused on here are about addressing impacts from normal operations. The second thing I was going to mention is that, and Mr. Green can add to this, I believe we have a requirement in the MDNS that involves the review and approval of a fire protection plan and fire safety response plan. And I think that involves coordination with the local fire response.
Yes, that's correct. The applicant is required to produce a fire response plan and an emergency management plan, both of which will be drafted in coordination with Rural 7 Fire and Rescue as well as the county. Both of those plans will be submitted to FSEC prior to construction for FSEC approval. And one of the mitigation measures that we have added to the original MDNS was a requirement that both of those plans be reviewed with Rural 7 and the county on an annual basis throughout the life of the project to update for any new guidelines or any new trainings or any new required equipment that would be needed for a response to a fire on the facility.
Thank you for the context. Mr. Childs, did that complete your comments or questions for now? And you're welcome to add to yours.
Yeah, I appreciate your guys' insight and stuff on that. I do believe, though, I know we're talking about normal operations, but when you look at the risk of BESS fires, it's a significant risk. It should be considered part of normal operation. The risk so far, historically speaking, has been that significant. So to ignore it and just say, well, this is something that's probably not going to happen, I think is very short-sighted in the long term, and ultimately going to be very detrimental to the citizens of our county should one of these catch on fire. And that I think concludes my comments on this for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Childs. And perhaps, you know, in one form or follow-up, meaning kind of emails in the interim, but ultimately would need to be part of our process and public record, which it certainly will. Our process does include, you know, extreme conditions or possibilities as part of that rigor, much as the other is focused on normal operations. I think that's worthy of reemphasis, both in the moment here, but as I know we've got a couple takeaways as far as follow-up from the fire conversation. Clearly, there's follow-on work that comes, I believe, even after potential of an SCA agreement, but this is also reviewed annually, things like that. So if there's a means to kind of just capture this discussion and obviously questions that need answers, knowing some are harder to, you know, have crystal clear, black or white type answers to them. But I don't think those unknowns need to reflect a lack of both diligence and rigor in the FSEC process. And perhaps, I think given the understandable focus, not only in Klickitat, but ultimately in any number of BESS systems in the state, whether they come through FSEC or frankly go through a local process or go through the Department of Ecology, this will be a known topic. And so to the degree that we take this specific set of questions and map it to the specific project, but clearly it's going to help inform the broader ongoing path ahead. So I'd encourage our attention and granted time and resource that goes with it to, you know, help capture the myriad of issues that are part of having a BESS inside, in this case, the solar project. So Director Prentice, looked like you may want to add something, but if not, that's fine. I'm misreading.
I'll just add, and I appreciate your comments, Chair Beckett, about the work that follows a site certification agreement, right? So once a site certification agreement with these conditions is executed, there are a number of facility plans that need to be drafted, reviewed. There is coordination, like we talked about, that's required for, say, the fire response plan for this facility. So there's certainly opportunity for refinement of those, addressing some of those issues in those plans, which we could further clarify in the SCA.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I guess I'll also acknowledge to the degree there is future work as well as annual ongoing work for the life of the project and things like decommissioning bonds and other things that are part of the full FSEC package. At the same juncture, in fairness to, you know, the public and especially residents and fence line neighbors to any project, in this case, should one be approved here, you know, we need to make the best, fullest decision possible now, knowing that our intent isn't to just say, well, we'll get to that later. But at the same time, getting to those things on a regular basis, both for the project, you know, if it were to be done, would be energized or things like that, that there is ongoing scrutiny for that beyond the rigor that we would bring, you know, in this both staff process and recommendation as well as the council's consideration. So just want to acknowledge that kind of both parts of that work. Other questions and comments? I see a hand raised, but I believe it's Council Levitt from our Council Levitt.
Hi, this is Eli Levitt from the Washington Department of Ecology. I do just want to mention that FSEC has some experience learning about BESS systems and fire prevention. I do believe there's national fire prevention standards now, or recently updated standards. And so, you know, similar to what we've been talking about, you know, to the degree we can require best practices up until this point in time, I think that is a significant step to helping to reduce risk for the community and the land in and around the project.
Thanks for that, Council. Let me just clarify in terms of a potential question was in there. Is that also whether there's any further standard that has already been promulgated, I guess, at the national level, or is that part of your question?
No, I didn't have a question. It's just a comment. I believe there are national standards for, and there's steps that companies can take, like putting the cells in smaller metal boxes that help contain potential, I don't know what the right word is, leakage from one cell to another when a small fire or chemical reaction starts.
Gotcha. Thank you. And ultimately, I think whatever form it comes in, just kind of capturing existing documentation around this, but this discussion and how does that look as far as more of a summation of the considerations, I think would be welcome. Sounds like to the council, but I'm sure the members of the public as well. So, okay, Director Bumpus.
And if it's helpful, just to clarify, Chair Beckett and for the council members, that FSEC will be doing the plan review, the fire plan review, and looking at the requirements under the National Fire Protection Association. So we are looking and comparing, are they meeting those standards? Are they meeting the requirements, the guidance for best practices?
Thank you. Other comments or questions for the project presentation? Just to remind us, I guess, where we're at. Project part. Okay. Hearing none, I think, Councilor Young.
It is now the appropriate time to comment on or discuss the upcoming June 4th consultation with Yakima, or should I wait till this segment of the discussion is over?
I think it would be probably most appropriate here, ultimately, but if others would advise differently, we can take it up in a moment, but it would be more around the action to be considered at that point, so I think it's probably more appropriate on the project update.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett. I think that some of this was highlighted in Mr. Green's presentation, that we have a tentative date in early June to meet with the Yakima and conduct government-to-government consultation. The documents that we would be preparing if the council were to take action and directing staff to prepare the recommendation materials, we would have placeholders in those documents so that following the discussion with the Yakima that's anticipated for early June, we could then include a written report on what comes out of that process. One thing I'll note is, at this time, and I think Mr. Green mentioned this as well, that these milestones are very close together. They're, many of them, very tentative. So there's a lot of variables there. This could shift if there's need to maybe have follow-up conversation with the tribe. I would anticipate that the technical staff could do that, and then include that information in the recommendation documents, but being respectful of protected tribal cultural resource information. We would need to adhere to that. But there is the possibility for additional, time to consider what comes out of that process. But for now, we anticipate the documents could be prepared with placeholders, and that information could be added for the council to be able to review in writing.
Okay, thanks. I understand that, but I do have a couple of points I'd like to make about how FSEC approaches that interaction with Yakima. It is now the right time to raise that, or do we have a next agenda item about what direction we give to staff where that would be more appropriate?
Councilor Young, let me kind of ask you before I go act on the following. One, it is appropriate to discuss this now. I was going to add one comment as the chair who's designated, to do consultation for the council as far as our statute goes. And then I would turn this to you for, comments, questions that you intend to make. Is that acceptable for you?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
For my part, including, as the chair being designated under statute to conduct consultation government to government on behalf of the council and the FSEC, I just want to acknowledge a couple things in the letter that we received from the chair. And number one was thank you for that direct communication, as well as within it an invitation to attend the Yakima Council meeting on the 4th of June, which is our intent to do so. And appreciate, that still exists, knowing that ultimately there are at least a couple, maybe there's more different definitions, interpretations of consultation. I respect that. I'm ultimately not saying that ours is the way or the only way, nonetheless, the FSEC way is based on the statute created by the legislature for the agency, so we have that reality to acknowledge. But I also acknowledge that the Yakima have stated that they believe consultation is in-person, government to government, and the full council of FSEC with the Yakima full council. And I respect, and I hear that, and I just want to acknowledge that in public and on the record. I don't have a reconciliation perfectly for that yet. To the degree we can find alternate means that accomplish more of the intent of government-to-government consultation, ultimately, whether we call it that or is there some other useful means short of that, including based on the Yakima interpretation. I just want to acknowledge those issues, the fact that I'm thinking about them and trying to find some creative solutions on how best to work through, in this case, this particular project, knowing there are probably other broader issues ultimately they're at play here around this project and frankly, throughout the territories of the Yakima. And so that's just part of the work that has been before I got here, and clearly it is part of the work now as a member of the council. So with that, Council, I'm happy to answer questions or clarify anything I've just shared, but let me first just turn this to Councilor Young out of deference that you have been waiting. But nonetheless, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. First point I wanted to make is I think we should stop referring to the upcoming interaction with Yakima as government-to-government consultation. As Yakima clearly stated in their letter, what would be upcoming is not government-to-government consultation as Yakima understands that to be. Rather, what we are doing is we would be consulting pursuant to RCW 8050-060 Part 8. And so that certainly is a type of consultation that is specifically encouraged and directed in RCW, but it's not government-to-government consultation. So I think we should stop calling it that. And then my second point is that in that May 14th letter, Yakima has requested two things prior to the meeting taking place. And those were on the second page of their letter in the second to last paragraph, where number one, they're requesting that certain information that FSEC has be transmitted to them ahead of time, so they could prepare for the meeting and understand what we've got so far. And then the second is they are asking for ahead of the meeting written confirmation that no information shared with FSEC would be discussed in public forums. And I think that our direction to staff should direct staff to do both of those two things. So those are my 2 points.
Thank you, Councilor Young. And as you noted, and I perhaps in my own words too, and I appreciate your more thorough citation, that we do have a couple important, but nonetheless a couple separate realities to deal with. It did catch my eye as well in the PowerPoint, which I don't think obviously was done with any out of bad intent, but nonetheless, it's called government to government, and out of respect to the Yakima, including the letter, that is, they just see that differently, and I think perhaps we don't need to compound those differences of worldview. That hopefully we can get a better resolution to, and I'm certainly happy to work as appropriate with you, Councilor Young, on what range of possibilities that ultimately might be. So, Director Bumpus, I think you also may wish to add.
Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. I just wanted to let the council know that I have reviewed the Yakima's letter, and staff do intend to provide the information that they requested, the two pieces of information and assurance of the confidentiality of the discussion. And we also, I also recognize as well that while this is consultation
per our statute, for our purposes, we do recognize that it is not such for their purposes.
Councilor Young, was there any further question or comment you wanted to add? Appreciate.
No, those were 2 points I wanted to make, and I still have my concerns that I expressed at our special meeting a couple weeks ago. I'm still concerned that this is proceeding under expedited processing versus regular procedures that would allow adjudication. But had the comments that per where we are at this point in time, and Director Bumpus's remarks there were satisfying the questions I had. So thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Councilor Young. Other discussion from council? Questions? Okay. Then at that point, we'll conclude the project briefing, and our next item to be considered is someone may need help with this. I didn't write down what would then become a motion, but
I'm going to navigate back to the previous slide.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So with this, we will move to potential action. Screen share again. Thank you. So we have a potential action in front of us there where council would direct staff to prepare draft recommendation documents for approval or denial of the project. Ultimately, that would create the documents that would go into a site certificate agreement for the governor. What is the will of the council to entertain the staff request to continue with an expedited process with the time frame that has been shared in the presentation? As has been noted, today's intent from the staff would be to essentially allow adequate time for the documents to be prepared, as well as noted with adequate flexibility to continue to update and change those documents based on other external inputs or updates, requests from the council. So that is the essence of what the action would be. Is there a motion by which to move directing staff to prepare the draft recommendation documents for approval or denial of the Carriger Solar project?
Thank you, Councilor Chair. Yeah, I move that we direct FSEC staff to prepare the draft recommendation documents for approval or denial of the project, including in that recommendation for approval that the staff include the conditions outlined in the MDNS, those in the slides presented today on the RMDNS, as well as any proposed mitigation conditions following the discussions with Yakima Nation.
Thank you, Council. Is there a second? If I could get a, thank you. We'll take, I was going to note, I should have at the outset, so I apologize. We'll have discussion and further input unless you need to amend the motion as stated, Director Bumpus.
That's correct, Chair Beckett. The motion should be picking one, either to approve, prepare documents that recommend approval or the denial, which I think the motion currently directs staff to prepare the recommendation materials for approval or denial. It has the word "or" in it, and the council needs to pick. Are they or do they want us to prepare documents that recommend approval, or do you want us to prepare documents that recommend denial?
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, hearing that, I following Robert's Rules of Order, I consider that a friendly amendment, and so
I would as well.
So then would the proposal, the motion's amended for approval of the project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Casey Brewster, second.
Motion has been made and seconded, is on the table, and we'll now take discussion. Councilor Young.
Could the motion be restated? We took a couple of of quick changes there. Could the motion as it is right now be restated fully? Thank you.
I'll be happy to take it back if you like.
Well,
Since you stated it, I'm happy to stick with you.
As the maker, I'll try this again here. So I moved that the council direct FSEC staff to prepare the draft recommendation documents for approval of the project. Included in those draft documents for recommendation for approval to include the conditions outlined in the MDNS, as well as on the slides presented today on the RMDNS, as well as any proposed mitigation conditions following the discussion with the Yakima Nation. And as there was a second on that motion, there is a chance, Mr. Chair, I'll speak to my motion.
Yeah, I'd like to propose a friendly amendment that we include point number 4 on the slide of any additional measures the council identifies. The motion only captures 1, 2, and 3 as just read back. It does not right now include number 4, and I'd like to friendly amendment that number 4 be included as well.
Council Young, I'm not tracking number 4 much as I appreciate it. I think second bullet number 3 is the way I'm interpreting that. Is that right, Mr. Young?
I'm looking at what is on my screen right now, and there are 4 numbered points under the second bullet, and the 4th of those is any additional measures the council identifies. Does everybody see that?
We do now. We have a couple.
Okay. That's what I was referring to, because the way the motion was just read, only points number 1, 2, and 3 under the second bullet were included, but number 4 was not included. And I'd like to make a friendly amendment that number 4 be included as well.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that proposal. I'll look to Stacy, if Councilmember Brewster, if she agrees. Okay.
Councilor Brewster's indicated yes, she does. So with that, motion is on the table and second as stated and is on screen for just clarifying purposes for the public or others who are participating in the meeting, especially online. Councilor Pamplin, you may have a further comment.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to appreciate the folks that came and attended the hearing on May 5th. I really appreciated the sentiment and the concerns shared. It really prompted me to take a second look and take another lap around the track, so to speak, on all the documents associated with this project and reviewing the MDNS, the staff memo, the actual determination by Director Bumpus, as well as hearing about the RMDNS now, as well as knowing that there's still further conversations with the Yakima Nation. I felt we're at a spot where I'm comfortable at least proceeding this to the next stage.
Very well. Comment. Are there other comments from council? Hearing none and seeing none, I will call the question then. For all those in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And abstain. Okay, the motion carries. And with that, thank you, council, for the good discussion, as well as staff for a helpful presentation and the work therein. And unless there are any closing comments, then we will move on to our next item, the Horse Heaven update. And Amy Moon, will give the update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council Chair Beckett and FSEC Council members. This is Amy Moon reporting on the Desert Claim Wind Power Project. I'm sorry, Horse Heaven. I apologize.
No, you're good. I thought it was me.
No, it would be a technical error. Okay, so once again, this is Amy Moon reporting on the Horse Heaven Wind Project. The certificate holder identified Goldwell as the water source for construction, operation, and decommissioning after the Horse Heaven Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, was issued. And in accordance with the Washington Administrative Code 197-11-600, which is titled When to Use Existing Environmental Documents, FSEC determined that an addendum to the final EIS was appropriate for documenting the review under SEPA, or the State Environmental Policy Act. The Department of Natural Resources Gould Well was identified in the October 2023 final EIS as a potential water source in section 2.2.9 potential use. The final EIS for the Horse Heaven analyzed impacts to water sourced from this aquifer. However, the analysis did not specifically evaluate this water source. The draft addendum identified Gould Well as the source for process waters to be used for site construction, operation, and maintenance. FSEC determined that the new information and analysis for Gould Well as the water source does not substantially change the final EIS analysis of significant impacts and alternatives, and that an addendum was appropriate for documenting this review under SEPA. The addendum to the Horse Heaven final EIS was posted to the FSEC Horse Heaven State Environmental Policy Act public website, and the public comment period was open May 5th through May 19th. FSEC received comments from 3 people. Comments were in general opposition to the project and concern over the use of this water source for non-agricultural uses. No comments were received from state agencies. Let's see. I don't know, is there anything that the director or Amy Hofkammeyer would like to add to this at this point?
I have nothing
Okay.
further to add.
All right.
Thank you.
The last part of my monthly update to the council is regarding the pre-operational technical advisory group, or the PTAG. And this advisory group continues to meet, review, and prepare technical advice on wildlife and wildlife habitat management, mitigation, and project design plans as required in the site certification agreement. And they are working toward making recommendations for FSEC's consideration. Does the council have any questions?
Council members? None at this time. Thank you, Ms. Moon. And moving on to Hop Hill Solar, John Barnes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This is John Barnes, FSEC staff for the Hop Hill application. FSEC met with the applicant on April 24th, 2025. During this meeting, the applicant expressed the need for additional time to submit project amendment materials from May until September or October 2025. The applicant needs additional time to update the project amendments to reflect recently received field data. We continue to coordinate and review the application with our contracted agencies and tribal governments. Are there any questions?
Questions from the council? None. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Moving on to Wallula Gap.
Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This is John Barnes, FSEC staff for the Wallula Gap application. FSEC met with the applicant on May 8th, 2025, during which the applicant indicated an inability to gain transmission access from the Bonneville Power Authority, or BPA, for the project. As a result, they would like to explore the option of pausing the application process until they can determine if a transmission connection option is viable for the project. FSEC has scheduled a meeting with the applicant for this Thursday, May 22nd, 2025, to discuss further details of this request. Staff will be bringing further updates to the council during the June 2025 council meeting. Are there any questions?
Comments or questions, council? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Moving on to the GoldenEye BESA project, Snarsky.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett. This is Joanne Snarsky, the siting specialist for the proposed GoldenEye battery energy storage facility in Skagit County. Staff are continuing to work with our partnering agencies to review and seek information on the application for site certification. This month, staff met with representatives from the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Skagit River System Cooperative to further evaluate drainage and creek buffers. Additionally, we anticipate receiving written input from the Department of Ecology in early June, and this would be based on their March 4th site visit. I have no further updates.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the council? Hearing none. Moving on to the transmission programmatic EIS. Mr. Green.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Beckett and council members. Again, this is Sean Green, SEPA Specialist for FSEC. I am here today to give you an update on our progress on the transmission programmatic EIS. This is a non-project environmental review of electrical transmission facilities with a nominal voltage of 230 kilovolts or greater that was assigned to FSEC by Washington State Senate Bill 5165 in 2023. Since the last council meeting, the public comment period for the draft programmatic EIS that began on March 31st has concluded. This period was initially scheduled to end on April 30th, but was extended by FSEC staff to May 15th to accommodate requests for additional review time from tribes, industry, and other organizations. In addition to the online comment database, email, physical mail, and phone lines, FSEC staff provided members of the public with the opportunity to submit comments at 2 public comment hearings held on April 22nd and April 24th. FSEC staff also attended the mid-year Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Conference last week to seek additional engagement with federally recognized tribes. FSEC staff is currently reviewing all comments received during this period, drafting responses that will be included in the final programmatic EIS, and developing and refining the draft programmatic EIS in preparation for the publication of the final programmatic EIS. FSEC staff have requested an extension of our contract to complete work on the final programmatic EIS from the Department of Enterprise Services, and we feel approval is likely. Currently anticipate publishing the final programmatic EIS in late September of 2025. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments? Let's check online. I would just add a quick one, which is thanks to both the staff and ultimately the public and other key constituencies who have been participating in many cases for past many months, but especially in more recent public comment times, and just want to thank and acknowledge that engagement, including at the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. I would be remiss if I didn't thank some of the mothers of the staff who traveled on Mother's Day to help attend and set up at AT&I, where a booth was also available, to help provide ongoing engagement through the course of that conference. So thank you for that added effort and sacrifice. Without other questions, then we'll move on to the Desert Claim Project. Amy Moon.
All right, so good afternoon again, Council Chair Beckett and FSEC council members. This time, it's Desert Claim. This is Amy Moon reporting on Desert Claim. FSEC received a request to terminate the Desert Claim Wind Project Site Certification Agreement, which we know as the SCA, on May 13th, 2025. The termination request from the project proponent, Desert Claim Wind Power LLC, stated that they no longer see an economically feasible path to finance construction and operation of the project, and therefore are requesting termination of the SCA. As construction was never started and this project has been on hold for several years, I want to provide a brief history for the council. The Desert Claim Wind Project is for a 100 megawatt total maximum capacity wind power project located on approximately 4,400 acres of purchased land and land leased from public and private owners in Kittitas County, approximately 8 miles northwest of Ellensburg. The project consists of a maximum of 31 turbines and associated electrical collection system that will connect the project to the regional high voltage transmission grid. FSEC received the application for site certification for the Desert Claim Wind Project in November of 2006. The FSEC Council approved the proposal and signed the SCA on February 1st, 2010. The Desert Claim SCA was amended twice. The first amendment, executed November 13th, 2018, updated the project footprint, reduced the total acreage from 5,200 acres to 4,400 acres, reduced the total number of turbines, increased the turbine height, updated the site access route, and increased the minimum turbine distance to all residences. The second amendment was executed October 18th, 2023 to extend the deadline for completing construction of the Desert Claim Wind Project by 5 years to November 18th, 2028. Termination of an SCA is considered an amendment to the SCA per Washington Administrative Code 463-66-020 termination. When an amendment is received in writing pursuant to WAC 463-66-030 request for amendment, the council will consider the request and determine a schedule for action at the next feasible council meeting, which conceivably could be today. In addition to a public hearing session, the FSEC Council shall also consider 4 critical criteria outlined in WAC 463-66040 amendment review. 1 would be the original intention of the SCA. 2, applicable rules and laws. 3, the public health, safety, and welfare. And 4, the provisions of Chapter 463-72, which is site restoration and preservation. I want to introduce the council's Assistant Attorney General John Thompson to further explain the review of these criteria for the desert claim termination request. If you are able, John.
Yeah, so again, John Thompson, FSEC legal advisor. So I think what I need to speak to is, so as Ms. Moon laid out, there is a FSEC procedural rule that says when there's a request to terminate a site certification agreement, it's treated as a request to amend. If you look at the rules on amendment, there's this requirement for at least 1 public hearing and consideration of various criteria. It's my opinion that because what the certificate holder here is proposing is before any construction of any sort has started on the site and before any financial assurance had to be posted for site restoration, because there's no ground has been broken, there's no infrastructure to be removed. There's really little point in doing anything other than issuing a council resolution, sort of acknowledging that the certificate holder has basically surrendered or abandoned its authority and presumably wants to stop paying for the council's oversight of its project. So that would be my recommendation. I don't think it requires the same formality as say the termination of a project that's partway through construction or at the end of its useful life, where there's a need to sort of wind up the operations and provide for the site restoration, because construction never even began. So I think procedurally it can be handled pretty easily. We might want to have staff prepare appropriate resolution language, maybe for the next council meeting. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Director Bumpus.
Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. I did get a chance to look at the rules that Mr. Thompson just talked about, where there's a formal process for SCA amendment requests, which technically termination of an SCA does fall under that. But in talking with our legal counsel, Mr. Thompson, I agree that we could, I think, go this route. The other thing that I'll note as well is that in those requirements in our rules, there's a requirement for a public hearing. But since 2022, FSEC takes public comment prior to any final action. So even though we would not be having a public hearing to take some comment on that, we have flagged this on the agenda, and there's public comment opportunity that is, if you will, baked in to the council meeting actions. So I didn't think we were losing anything there.
Okay. Appreciate that update. I think ultimately, as that gets finalized, knowing it's close but not final, was the question of, can this be accomplished in the June meeting versus outside the June meeting in a separate forum? Sounds like we're tracking that this would come in the June meeting, the regular council meeting, pending final confirmation just to update council on that versus a special meeting at a different time, which I think ultimately will help promote as much ease of access and transparency in the course of our regular meeting versus a special alternative meeting. So I think that serves the public interest as well. Any questions or comments, council, to what's been shared on Desert Claim? Okay, hearing none. We will then move on to item 6, other. We have a rulemaking update first, followed by a brief legislative update. Mr. Walker will take the rulemaking update first.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. Council, for the record, Dave Walker, Interim Director of Administrative Services with EFSEC. We introduced these housekeeping rule changes at last month's meeting, although we were not ready at that time to take action on them. It is the recommendation of EFSEC staff today that the council do consider taking action on housekeeping changes made to 24 of the 26 chapters within Title 463 of the Washington Administrative Code. All council members received this information, I believe, at the beginning of last month. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, beginning of April for review. Just as a reminder, these are housekeeping changes that are being proposed, such as the agency's physical address and telephone number, references to Old Public Records Act, outdated details about obtaining public records, references of EFSEC being under umbrella agencies at that time, such as the UTC and Commerce. EFSEC became a standalone agency in 2022. The definition of non-substantive changes, and I just want to make sure that the council is aware of this, and we do believe, as well as our AAG, that all of the proposed language changes do meet these criteria. To be non-substantive, one, they affect internal government operations that are not subject to violation by a person, or they adopt or incorporate by reference without material change of federal statutes or regulations, Washington state statutes, rules, or other Washington state agencies, or they correct typographical errors in clarifying language without changing the rules of facts. And we believe that all of the changes meet these criteria as we've outlined here. Lisa and I are both ready if the council has any particular questions about the rules being recommended for change.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I have one comment on more of the motion in a moment, but let me go ahead and see if there's questions or any further discussion, knowing we really did that last month, as was the intent of the public. We'll check with the council first. Okay, then I will pledge to do a more thorough upfront job of making sure I've got my actions ready to state. Will you help me out, Mr. Walker, since I can't find the number of the rule, to make sure that the motion that we would need to entertain to approve said ruling. What are we moving?
It's basically the motion should be to ask the staff, direct the staff to file the CR 103 to amend the changes to Title 463 of the Washington Administrative Code. I say the title because it's 24 of 26 chapters within that title, which I can read each one of the 24 statutes, or I would suggest just saying the title. And for the record, this is Lisa McLean.
Very well. So if there was council who is willing to entertain a motion, or I'm willing as the chair to entertain a motion to direct the staff to file CR 103 to amend the change to Title 463 of Washington Administrative Procedures Act.
Code. Washington Administrative Code.
Oh, WAC. So if there was a council member who was supportive of action on this rulemaking, if that motion would be entertained by the chair.
Lenny Young, so moved.
Thank you, Council Young. Is there a second?
Stacy Brewster, second.
Thank you, Council Brewster. The motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion by the council? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the motion as proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you, council and staff. And then moving on to the last update for the day, Lisa McLean will provide a legislative session update, which I will note was still potential to continue going up until yesterday afternoon. The governor signed the budget. So this is a very fresh moment in which you can update the conclusion of this session.
And I'll go
Oh, and
ahead.
I'm sorry, Dave.
No, that's okay. I'll go ahead and take lead on the updates, and then, of course, Lisa can be available
sure.
if there are any
Sorry.
questions specific. So there were two main bills, obviously, that passed that we were watching. First was agency request legislation, House Bill 1018. This added fusion energy to the list of opt-in facilities, which provides facilities the option as to whether they choose to follow FSEC processes or work with the local governments to lead their own coordinated efforts on that. The bill will take effect July 27th of this year and has been signed by the governor. The second bill is Senate Bill 5317, which exempted local governments from certain appeals when they provide services for review or oversight of projects under FSEC's jurisdiction. It's going to be adding one small paragraph to the RCW 80.50.120, which makes clear that city or county actions undertaken based on an agreement with FSEC are not subject to appeal for inconsistency within a local ordinance. There were a few bills that did not obviously pass this session. Were you also interested in hearing about those, Chair Beckett?
I think it was more just the
Just
main
an overall.
actions, unless council had other questions. But
Okay,
I think
perfect.
more of that which is now law.
Exactly.
It is certainly always to be noted of bills that are proposed, should they, return in other times.
Which
should not
we
lose sight of
expect
those,
they
but
will.
Other than having said and acknowledged that, I think just those that were adopted.
Okay, perfect. And then, of course, the budget bill was signed yesterday by the governor. There were a host of vetoes, section vetoes, that he noted. It was approximately 5 to 6 page document, I believe, covering all of the section vetoes from the governor. There were a couple in particular that didn't necessarily impact FSEC directly, although I do see some peripheral issues that we may need to consider. The first one was the Department of Commerce Battery Energy Storage Systems. It was a guidance document that was being proposed that Commerce would develop. That was vetoed, as well as $500,000 set aside for ecology to study offshore wind projects. So at this moment, obviously, we won't have anything more to do with those particular issues, although I suspect they may come up again in future budgets for deliberations.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for the update. I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. So are there other questions or comments from council this time? Everyone's welcome. Okay. Well, thank you, including for the request in this instance from Councilor Pamplin on the legislative update, which I appreciate. And
Chairman, there's Lenny Young has his hand raised.
Councilor Young, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. If it's appropriate to ask at this time, we did not get an update on Badger Mountain project today. Could staff remind what is the status of the Badger Mountain project?
Thank you, Councilor Young.
Go ahead, Amy.
And one's coming, in case you can't see that in the online mode.
So the status that we have is still that the project is on hold. We are expecting a status update, hopefully a decision by the developer in June.
In a month.
So that may be the end of June. If we have one in the next few weeks, we'll bring it forward at the June council meeting. But we may not have an update for the council until after that. So possibly it will come forward at the July council meeting.
Thank you.
Other closing questions, comments from council? Folks, good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. With that, I thank both staff and our external participants as well as council for hanging in here on a longer meeting today. It is now 3:10 and this meeting is adjourned.